We're back. Another brand new episode of the Last Wave Podcast. We dive into topics like ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, nerd stuff, and conspiracies. As always, thanks for listening. It means a whole lot. Check out our Facebook page as well as our Twitter and Patreon.com. Patreon.com is a subscription service that helps content creators like myself. It's very cheap. I have it set like $1 or $2 a month. You can always do more. And more will actually get you exclusive content, exclusive episodes, all that kind of stuff. We're always putting cool stuff on our social media accounts, so do make sure you check in there. Again, as always, thanks for listening. And today we're going over something kind of interesting. We're going to change the format a little bit. This episode will be certainly the longest one. I'm going to try to do a few longer episodes, but really dive into the research, not necessarily just give you some quick bullet points like I have been doing. I like that format. You know, you can knock it out. You knock out an episode on the way to the store, picking your kids up at school, etc. But I do like to do research and dig into stuff a little bit more. So we're going to try this. We're also trying a new singular style actual thumbnail instead of the like 15 different ones that I've been using, because the page looks a little chaotic on YouTube. So we'll see how this goes. I think this looks a lot nicer with the title and everything. So we'll see how this looks and we'll see how this turns out. Anyway, I'm still a little bit under the weather. I know I said that in a couple of my last videos, so do try to bear with me. Anyway, today we're going over, as the thumbnail states, what's called the wandering gods theory. This is something really interesting I heard of probably 6 months ago. It's just something I found, kind of throughout my research into religion and ancient history and stuff. I just kind of stumbled across it. One thing I found as well, as others have found, because there is other videos on this, I found a few, is a connection between a number of numerous gods from around the world. Now, this could be 100% accumulation of years of interconnectivity of cultures, things of that nature. The Adamic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Catholicism as well, all have brought things in and stories from other cultures, forming them into their religions, making it easier for others like pagans and infidels to cross over into their religion throughout history. That being said, there are still connections between these gods as well. And then you can tie these into gods of ancient Egypt, the Norse, the Greek pantheon, and even a few that I surmise, the Hindu gods. Hindu religion is very elaborate and is filled with multi-hand gods, animal-like deities. You see that in religious depictions as well, but no one's really sure if it's metaphor or if it's, a literal, like 10-handed god. So the first connection in so many of these god groups or pantheons is the bringing to humans of knowledge or language. In Egypt, you have the god Thoth, god of knowledge and wisdom. Thoth's Egyptian name was Jehuti, which means he who is like the ibis. The ibis was a sacred bird in ancient Egypt, as well as popular pet and associated with wisdom. Another name for Thoth was Lord of the Kemenu, later known as the city of Hermopylae, which was his major cult center. Hermopylae was so named because of the Greek association with Thoth with their god Hermes. And to the Greeks, Thoth became Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth the thrice great, often given as 3 times great. So you see a connection there between two, like that's a blatantly, we're saying this God is actually known to us, but it's known by this name. But also, if you think of a God who brings knowledge, you could also look north to the Norse. Odin hung himself from the world tree for 9 days, side pierced with a spear, in between life and death. He was granted knowledge of the runes and language. There's a small link there between Odin and Jesus as well. Both hung from wooden structure, side pierced with a spear. But anyway, Odin brought this knowledge to the Norse and gave them their language. Odin is also known as a wise wanderer. He can cross willingly between the realms of the living and the dead. He crosses through all 9 realms of the Norse universe willingly, and in an unexpected connection going back to Hermes that I did not know until I did some digging, Hermes is also known as a god of boundaries and transitions. Hermes was known to be quick and cunning and had the ability to freely move between the mortal and divine worlds. It is this skill that made him a luck-bringing messenger to the gods and an intercessor between mortals and the divine. He is also the patron and protector of travelers. So this is mentioned in pagan rituals and prayers still today. Often those who seek to meditate or gain knowledge will start with Woden or Odin, wise wanderer, protect me as I travel and allow me to see the realms that you see. So, to quickly recap on these little connections, Hermes, Thoth, and Odin, 3 gods from supposedly completely separated groups, although the Greeks and Egyptians did connect. They're still very different, and these 3 gods have many things in common. Even looking back to Thoth's other name, Jehudi, which means he is like the ibis, and ibis being a bird, obviously. Hermes is always shown as flying or having winged feet, while Odin is well known as the god who has 2 ravens bringing him news of the day. It is ironic that these 3 gods could have had any animal associated with them, any other animal in the world kingdom, but it just happens to be birds with each. Good, could be absolutely nothing there, but you do see the connection. Moving on to further connections elsewhere, onto South America, the Toltecs, Quetzalcoatl, the sky god, was considered the god of arts and all knowledge, but thought to be a god of dying and resurrection as well. He was also the patron of the priests to the Aztecs. The doctrine that Quetzalcoatl brought to the Aztecs was the belief in only one god, and he did not approve of human sacrifice. Quetzalcoatl, the man of myth, is described as a man of golden hair and a golden beard. And remember, this is in South America, with light eyes and skin, and is thought to have been a Caucasian male. Some of the depictions of Quetzalcoatl paint a white mask on him to portray the color of his skin. It is believed to have been a Viking by some historians, who had traveled to the American continent before Columbus, and legend says he arrives on the shores of Mexico and traveled throughout the Mayan and Aztec worlds. Now, the research that I found, as I stated, thought this god could be a Viking. However, a Viking would never, in my opinion, mention one god to follow. Well, they may, but it would be very rare, and it would be either Odin or Tyr, possibly, maybe Thor. But again, there's a whole pantheon that they would use at all times. So the mention of one god was kind of strange. There are actually some connections to Odin or Woden in South America. Areas pop up with the name Votan, which is a derivative of Woden or Odin. Also, I could not find information on this. However, I vividly remember a section of the Chariots of the Gods books by Zachariah Sitchin of Ancient Aliens fame. And in the book, it speaks of Quetzalcoatl given the description above, fair hair and skin, bringing knowledge, speaking of one god, etc. But also it notes in the book that he traveled with individuals matching his description. This sounds to me more along the lines of a Jesus Christ type character, traveling with disciples. So while this seems to be a double connection to multiple religions, and many people these days are following the evidence that Jesus was actually a Buddhist monk named Issa, I for one think not only that it is possible he could have been a reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. I'm sorry, I read that all wrong. Basically, my theory is I do kind of subscribe to the Jesus Christ as a monk theory. There's some evidence behind it, some actual physical evidence. There's so many years of his life that are missing in the Bible. You can actually look at when a Dalai Lama passes on, the monks bring items to the suspected reincarnation of the Dalai Lama to see if he can connect to any of the items from the past life. So when Jesus was born, 3 wise men came and brought him gifts from a foreign land. I mean, that, it matches. That's all I'm saying. But that's a story I will save for another episode because that, like I said, there's evidence to that. There's a lot going on with that. So that would probably make a really good episode. So you have, again, evidence that matches at least the people of Odin, if not the gods themselves, moving through South America, bringing knowledge and impressing upon the people enough to have places left in his name, still today. The connections between, again, separated cultures are hard to ignore. The fair hair and skin certainly do not match any known tribe in South America during that time. There are other, probably more far-fetched connections and appearances of some of these wandering gods as well. Again, I will relate to the bird connection in Thoth and Odin, as well as one I have found, and I'm just throwing the line out there because these pantheons are so different in recorded appearance, is Loki and Krishna from the Hindu culture. Now, I have never heard anyone, nor believe anyone, try to make this connection, but it's just a random, random little drop in the bucket. But if you take into account even our crap knowledge of Loki in modern movies, he was, in some stories, born of the Jotnir, the ice giants from Jotunheim, one of the realms of Norse culture. These ice giants are seen as hulking, blue creatures, ice giants. It kind of makes sense. But if you take the blue theme and many accounts of Loki's activities and attitude, they may very well match with Krishna, which the books of Hindu culture, they portray him in various perspectives: a godchild, a prankster, a model lover, a divine hero, and most do see Loki as a trickster god as well. So this is only an off-the-wall idea, but it could be something. I mean, again, even with I basically just described Krishna in the same way you would describe the Marvel movie Loki. Not that that's anything that Loki was really like, but again, it's something that I found that I thought was kind of funny. If you look at the abilities of the Hindu gods, flying machines, aerial battles, seemingly modern or future technology, weapons with firing lasers or lightning, they do match some of the abilities of the Norse pantheon, who also have weapons that hurl lightning. This brings us to another connection: large, fair-skinned, bearded, lightning hurling. That brings us back to the Greek pantheon and Zeus, the Greek sky god, famous for strength, weather controlling, and his sexual tendencies. There are a few connections between Odin or even Thor and Zeus. It is thought by some that many of these gods could very well be the same, and it is, of course, not a popular idea, but we already know that the Romans and the Greeks used many of the same deities, just by different names. And apparently, as we stated earlier with Thoth, even Egyptian deities by different names. So I believe wholeheartedly that interaction by these wandering gods were not just happening on a couple continents, but multiple. While there are clear matching occurrences between these gods, and their appearances, we can also look at the connection in some of their actions. Again, Krishna and Loki, both known as trickster gods. Well, why would there be a trickster god? Isn't it hard enough to be human and survive anyway? We don't need all of this trickster and evil and things of that nature. So there too. But around the world, there are somewhere between 30 and 50 separate gods attributed as trickster gods, including Set from Egypt. Again, we have a seemingly purposeless god, you would think, but repeated over and over in religions around the world, and some as major deities in their pantheons. Now, this could be due to the fact that humans want a reason for crappy things that happen, so they look to place the blame outward, and if the sun is a god or rain is sent by a god, then surely my lost car keys must be the work of some evil trickster god. So a grain of salt with that connection. But it is rather interesting that nearly every god pantheon in the world that I can find, everyone that I can find, has a trickster type god or entity mixed in with it. Looking further into the complete pantheons of gods from around the world, There are also some small random coincidences. The Armenian god pantheon from Proto-European times has been blended and had their gods renamed under the Greek pantheon. And once Christianity took over in the region, even some biblical figures took on the roles of their gods. One of the names I found interesting was Tyr, T-I-R. It is similar to the Norse god Tyr, which is the Germanic form of a Norse god. There are theories that Tyr could be the original sky god of the Norse pantheon. In the the Armenian pantheon, the god shares a lot of similarities with Tyr and Odin, known as a god of wisdom and written language, culture, science, and messenger of the other gods. Again, we have this messenger figure keep popping up, denoting the god's ability to traverse many different realms, in my opinion. As far as he's actually carrying around, Snapchats and text messages. I don't know, but I feel like the fact that he's known as a messenger, it basically just states that this God has the ability to travel between the world of the divine and the world of the humans, is what I would assume, but can't speak to 100%. And I know we were jumping around a lot in this episode, um, but so did the gods. So just bear with me. They moved all over the place. Again, my research is I basically write as I go. So every now and then I'll find a little tidbit to add in as I'm going. Um, anyway, further into the complete pantheons, in the Canaanite pantheon of biblical times is where I found something very interesting. Number one, it has one of the largest pantheons I've ever seen. Like I did not expect biblical god pantheons to be, so I mean it's 20 plus gods in this one. Surprisingly, the god El, or the God of creation, is where we get the term Elohim, which is a term in the Hebrew Bible used as a term for God. But it is thought to mean God in the plural, so that's interesting. I had no idea they had so many gods as one of the biblical groups. One would not expect that for sure. Anyway, Elohim is used as a term God, but it's very interesting that the translation is, you know, it's changed to God when Elohim is meant to mean plural, as in gods. So we're kind of reading that wrong in a way, but it makes sense if you look at Genesis. We will create man in our image and things of that nature. Statements like that. So it kind of makes sense, but it seems like there's some fishy stuff going on. We're not going to dive into that. We're going to keep going. The pantheons around the world do have some occurrences of gods that match descriptions of others. However, the largest ones definitely do. Norse, Egyptian, Greek, Roman all have multiple gods represented that match nearly perfectly with others. So it is possible that these are the same gods and they travel throughout the world to places like South America, Africa, and North America. The Native American pantheon shares similarities intertwined with one another, but also some links to possible wandering gods. Glooskap is one I noticed that was an interesting deity known to the Native Americans. He was known as a protector of the people, kind, benevolent, and a warrior against evil and possessor of magical powers. So this actually matches almost a direct match to a Thor-like figure. Ironically, the deity was known mainly to the tribes of the native people located in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and Atlantic Canada, um, which if you look at suspected travel route from Norse held lands, these would be the most likely places for Norse legends to land per se. So again, not only do you have a possible connection in god types, but a definite connection into where the people with these gods would have traveled and would have landed first. One thing the Native American pantheons do have in common with each other are usually a benevolent creator god and an evil, malevolent god, a god and devil sort of archetype. And on a side of not a really cool deity, I found, or on a side note, sorry, a really cool deity I found came from the Inuit tribes Torgerusk, I believe I'm saying that right, is the master of whales and seals and most powerful supernatural being in Greenland. He appears in the form of a bear, or as a one-armed man, or as a grand-sized human. Now, Tyr in the Norse mythology lost a hand to the battle of the great wolf in the battle of a great wolf in the battle with the great wolf Fenrir. So that is a real, like, I don't know, it's a thin connection, but mainly I just thought it was a cool deity. The basic image of Torngarusk um, harkens up a Norseman. It says the form of a bear, but shows what looks like a very large man covered in fur pelts. So, it could be a Norse, could be a Norseman, could be a Norse god. Again, you find that these legends travel. They travel with the people, and these people bring their own beliefs to wherever they go. So if you trace where they have been, you'll more than likely find connections in gods. Stories get passed along, things are mentioned, things are blended. In the case of Christianity and wanting to convert a lot of people, you have things like the flood story. Um, you know, in most large religions, most large pantheons, historical things of that nature, they all have this story of the flood, story of the deluge in their history. So it definitely seems like there is connections between all of these entities, these gods. After hours, I mean, just hours of research, it is now more clear to me than ever that at least some of history's most prominent pantheons do have connections with one another. Some of the more obscure pantheons and regions of the world have far too many different deities to really pull it together, but do show at least a creator god and or one who is known for bringing language to the people. Um, I am not sure if all societies were affected by these wandering gods, but I would bet from what I've learned that these deities affected large swaths of mankind, and maybe one day we will know for sure. But for now, it's only conjecture, I guess. Um, there are obviously differences between all of the gods and all of that, but there are also so many connections that you can make, and that's what really started pulling people into this research. I think especially the places in South America where they do match the name and derivatives of names of Woden and Odin. That to me was really powerful research. That was incredible. Did not see that coming. Obviously, most people wouldn't. The historical narrative is, it's always Christopher Columbus discovered America, yada yada yada. No one else was really traveling at the time, apparently. But I mean, I think there's clear evidence that's kind of come to the surface over the last probably decade that the Vikings traveled a lot further. Definitely made it to the shores of America pre-Columbus, and apparently the shores of South America pre-conquistadors. So you have all these legends and all these gods that you can kind of tie in with one another. You've also got to look at things of the physical nature as well as markers, basically things in Norse language that have been found here. I know a story that came out maybe a year or two ago that there was a grave of a Norse, of a Viking, basically a Viking king or whatever. And in this grave was found um, blue beads, and you can only get these beads in Egypt at that time, it was thought. So there you have direct, at least some kind of interaction between these two cultures. And it does make a lot of sense that they would interact. I mean, they're two seafaring cultures, two of the most powerful cultures of the ancient world. So I think there was a lot more connection between these cultures than we really know about for sure. I would say that's a definite 100%. So I don't know if we're just not allowed to know, or if, people have just accepted the main narrative, the main story. I can't speak to that, but I can definitively say that I believe there was connections, and that at least some of these gods are the same people, or the same god, same deity. if not a good handful of them. So anyway, that's pretty much the story for today. Like I said, that felt like a really long episode, and that wasn't even 30 minutes. So definitely got to work on getting some co-hosts because it's hard just talking for 30 minutes straight. But I did enjoy that. That was some real research I really put in. But yeah, good episode. Appreciate you listening. Check out our Facebook page, Twitter, Patreon.com, all that stuff. And we'll keep putting out episodes, and we thank you for your patronage. And we'll check you next time.